Well, very warm welcome to Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic. It's a very early morning start here due to the heat. We're expecting to get a little bit later on. But first up, it's the elite men. It's the final ITU World Cup race of the year. It's been a long season for the athletes. It's been a long season for us as well. Lisa Norton's alongside me. Welcome along. Fascinating race. We've seen some great racing over the last few weeks as the season comes to a close. But there are a lot of big names in this field this week. And you know, when you try and pick a winner from the field between both the men's and the women's, it's very, very difficult. Everybody's been in good form. And, you know, really looking forward to seeing who comes out on top in this one. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. There's a few names we didn't see last weekend, but we saw them a couple of weeks ago in Miyazaki. And all these athletes are, you know, in pretty good form, had slightly different kind of race plans. And they're all kind of meeting up here. So it's going to be a very interesting clash of good athletes. Well, here come the athletes being introduced to the crowd, all in good form as well, it would appear. 26-degree the water temperature, so a non-wetsuit swim today. 23 degrees the air temperature, as we say. It is expected to get quite hot later. We are preempting the fact that the women's race, even though it's an Olympic distance, may have a reduced run to 5 kilometres, but that's still yet to be confirmed. There's Eli Hemming just going through the screen there. As I say, it is over the Olympic distance, this race here in Santo Domingo. And, of course, the final race of the year, 2-lap 750-metre swim in the marina of the Sans Souci Naval Officers Club. You know, fairly flat, no great chop in there. We've seen some great sea swims over the last couple of weeks, but this is quite a nice sheltered swim today. There's the bike, 5 laps, 8.48 kilometres per lap, 42.4 kilometres in total, so a little bit longer than 40 kilometres. We think predominantly flat along the promenade, along España Avenue, here in the Dominican Republic, and then the run. 3 laps of 3.33 kilometres, just bang on 10 kilometres to determine the gold medal. But as we say, a lot of athletes were keen to have this as an Olympic distance race, the final race of the year. Of course, we've said it many times, it's an Olympic race or Olympic season next year. So the more Olympic distance races for a lot of these athletes, the better. Yeah, and also with different selection criteria and the different committees, a lot of athletes, they want to race an Olympic distance racer because they might need to prove themselves or have a certain result that would benefit them in the Olympic qualification. So there are a lot of athletes in the field. We have had 1 or 2 late withdrawals as well. Let's take a look. It's a wonderful area, this. Very popular with the tourists, as you can imagine, in the Dominican Republic. Matt Mcelroy has had a great couple of weeks, first in Miyazaki and in Tongyong, heading up a big American contingent. Morgan Pearson and Eli Hemming just behind him. Rostislav Petsov has had to pull out this morning with an Achilles problem, so the number 4 won't be racing. Kevin Mcdowell, another American within the top 10. Manuel Macias won in Peru last week, a fantastic win for him. It was quite an emotional time last week in Peru with the winners and the podium placings. And Irving Perez, one of a number of Mexicans, as you can see, 3 of them on that top page. Irving Perez there wearing number 10. Felix Duchamp wearing the ITU colours. Ran Sagiv has had a good year as well. Ryan Sissons, the New Zealand, a very good runner, of course. We're expecting to see him doing some good things here today. Matt Schott from Canada. Barclay Izzard from Great Britain. I think he's the only great British man in the field this week. Tamas Todt has also pulled out. He's got a bit of a sickness bug at the moment. It can often be the case, can't it, when you come to places like this, a little bit of sickness in. Also, Gregor Payet is missing as well. But Richard Varga, we know he will probably be one of those leading out of the water. Yeah, definitely. He will push the pace here, and it's going to be, I think, a much quicker swim than what we saw last weekend in Peru, in Lima. So Varga, so top of that particular pace there, Felipe Barraza from Chile. Quite a few South Americans making the journey. Russell White from Ireland. Igor Polyansky, one of the 2 Polyansky brothers. His brother Dimitri, who's actually on the next page, hasn't showed up for the race. We don't know whether he had some visa problems or whatever, but there will only be 1 Polyansky in the race. Florin Savisberg from Switzerland had a great race last week, of course, very emotional for him, finishing 2nd on the podium. He was shedding a few tears as well. Such was the relief and the emotion of getting onto a podium as well. Gabor Faldum from Hungary there, number 41. As we say, no Dimitri Polyansky in the field, and no Bob Haller. He's also ill as well. Yuki Abe, not too many Asian too much Asian representation, should we say, in the race this week. They could have had their time in Tongyong and Miyazaki, a lot of them using those as the closing race of their season. Danilo Pimentel, there's a lot of Brazilians here as well. Matias Diniz, Taylor Forbes from Canada down there at number 61. It is a big field. There are 66 numbers, so 65 initially, and then we've lost 5. So 60 will be on the starting lineup. It is quite a small swim start area as well. They're quite well packed in, as you can see. Sun just coming up at the moment. It is little after 7 o'clock in the morning, local time. This has been a strange race, hasn't it, Lisa? We expected the women's elite race to be first, then it was switched to the men's, and the timings have been going backwards and forwards because obviously athletes' safety has to be of paramount, and with the hot temperatures expected, they don't want anybody to get into any difficulties. Yeah, no, the crew on site have been working very, very hard to make the race happen in as good conditions as possible for the athletes. Obviously, it's been very difficult conditions. It's very, very hot and humid, and you don't want to race when it's danger to the athletes. So they're under orders, and they're off for the 2-lap 750-metre per lap swim. So it is literally straight out. 350 metres or so, 50 metres across between those two red buoys you can see in the distance, and then 350 metres back to shore. And always dramatic, isn't it, when you've got this many men in a field, as we've seen, coming together like the point of an arrow, and it'll be a question of who gets to the front. We know Igor Polyansky is a great swimmer. We know Richard Varga is a great swimmer, so it wouldn't be any great surprise to see those two really setting the pace here. No, you actually have a bunch of really good swimmers here, and I'm sure being Olympic distance, they have perfect opportunity, especially on the second lap, to stretch the field and probably gain a bit of a gap on the main field here. And I think that's the race plan for at least 3, 4, 5 of the athletes, to have a gap and hopefully be able to maintain that on the bike. You've raced it, of course, at elite level. How nice is it to have like Santo Domingo as the final race of the season? Because a lot of people now will be taking a bit of time off. So it seems to me perfect to do the race and then have a bit of time in the Dominican Republic, a bit of downtime before you get back to the serious business of your training again. Yeah, well, definitely. I couldn't pick a better place to finish your season. When it showed up on the calendar, it's like, oh, maybe I should go and do a World Cup to end my year. And I think a lot of, obviously, there's Olympic points and there's qualification and rankings, etc. on the line. But you also choose what, that actually excites me a little bit, and that's a place where I would like to see, and a race is a good reason to go there and to finish off a year and have a couple of drinks maybe on the beach and pat yourself on the back and, be happy about what you've done before you start over. I think this is a perfect place. Absolutely. The new season, I know the season hasn't finished yet, but it will get underway in February with Cape Town, the original or the normal starting venue for the World Cup races. And then, of course, Abu Dhabi starts off the WTS series in March. But just a little bit of chop around, as you can see. We saw some great pictures from the beach. There's some really good surf here on the beaches. So lots of good sport. And we saw lots of two interesting swims in the last 2 weeks. I saw some pictures from the swim familiarization, and it looked like the surf was actually quite big, and there was a few, legs being pointed towards the sky instead of any other swimming direction. This morning it looks a bit calmer, and normally in the mornings the sea is a little bit calmer and smoother, so it's possible the chop will pick up a little bit for the women's race. But this looks like perfect swimming conditions, and I'm sure it's actually quite beautiful to be on the beach right now with the sunrise, and you see all these arms and the splash in the water and the athletes, fighting their way out towards the first buoy. But it's early. 7 o'clock is a very, very early start even for elite athletes. And I saw the breakfast was scheduled to 3:30 a.m. Wow. So have a think about that when you see these athletes battling and fighting hard out there. They had a very, very early morning, and they've been up for a bunch of hours already. Yeah, a lot of these athletes raced in Peru last week, so they haven't had a massive distance to travel to get here in terms of losing any time in time difference. There were just a handful of athletes that raced in Miyazaki and then went to Peru, the likes of Ayueda in the women's race, who, of course, has won back-to-back races. Interesting to see how she fares a little bit later on. It's an interesting, part of the year with a lot of travel. To go to Tonyong, Miyazaki, then make your way over to South America, race in Lima, and then come over to Dominican Republic. That's a handful of travel. And I'm sure that's why we see, a few sick athletes, and it's difficult to maintain a good health and stay on top of things because you're, in airports, you're on airplanes, you're getting to new hotels, to countries that you don't know what kind of food you're meant to eat. So, heads up to the athletes who, got here and they're healthy and they're strong.
And we also have some athletes that we've seen in the last couple of World Cups, but not in Lima. So they've chosen a slightly different path of travel, and they might have gone home and had a couple of weeks back home in between, had some, mommy's food, and back into normal routines, and then you choose to do one-off travel to the Dominican Republic.
So they've reached the first turn, as you can see, all pretty much together at the moment, not too much to split them.
Normally you see that for the first lap, and that's why the sprint distance is normally a bit more compact when they come out of the water. It's more a big bunch. In Olympic distance, the second lap is what really stretches the field, and it's where you can get the bigger gaps. So it'll be interesting when they come up to the beach and then see what happens from the first re-entry to when they exit on the beach for the second time.
Well, one man possibly to look out for. Number 65, Cameron Worth, 36-year-old Australian, racing in his first ITU race. Be interesting to see how he gets on today.
This is my favorite athlete to watch today. It's going to be super interesting to see how Cameron will go. Obviously, being Australian, he probably done a fair share of swimming when he grew up, but he came from professional cycling, been racing on the highest level in cycling, and then he started doing Ironman, and I think it was 4th or 5th. Now I'm going to have a lot of people correct me, in Kona early this year. So he's an amazing Ironman long-distance athlete. But this is the first time in the ITU kind of circuit, mixing up with the youngsters and the fast boys. So I think he will have a little bit of a challenge to get through the swimming. The swimming is super, super fast in the ITU. So hopefully, somewhere in contact. And it's going to be interesting to see, how he just, goes throughout the race. Copes with the heat and the intensity.
Absolutely. You mentioned Ironman there, actually. We've got to congratulate a couple of Olympic distance triathletes who've just won an Ironman event in China. Martin van Riel from Belgium winning the men's event, and Ashley Gentle winning the women's. Van Riel's was a race record time, and Ashley Gentle in a run record, 1 hour 21 minutes. So congratulations to them taking the step up to the longer distance.
Yeah, no surprises there. I'm actually surprised Ashley hasn't done a half Ironman earlier. It's right down her alley with her bike strength and her amazing running. And you see a lot of the athletes when they do the crossover to half Ironman, they go super well and really kicking ass from the start.
So as we said, it's been a long season. This is the 17th race on the ITU World Cup circuit this year. It's been a fantastic season as well. Lots of different winners, lots of first-time winners on the World Cup series as well.
A lot of emotions.
Yes.
It has been amazing to see how much this means to get on the podium and to achieve what you've been working so hard on for. For some athletes, it's been a period of years before they get that special moment on the podium.
Yeah, well, I know we've mentioned it over the last few weeks about Olympic qualifying. It is quite complicated. Just to remind you, 55 athletes in the men's and the women's race in Tokyo next year. Japan have already got 2 places in each race because they're the host nation, but everybody else has places up for grabs, and each association or each Olympic Association committee has their own criteria for qualification. But all you can do really in a lot of this is just prove that you're the best, get to the top of the pile, and hope then that either your results are good enough or the selectors will choose to see you fit enough to be a good medal contender.
Yeah, definitely. The earlier the better, I would say. If you know you're pretty safe and you're kind of qualified a year out, that's a fantastic position to be in. In many cases, that's not what's happening. You have to prove yourself quite late, and you have to race quite a busy schedule and kind of prove yourself over and over and over again. So you see now they're racing all the way into November, and they're going to start again in February to just make sure they get that slot on the Olympic team. So here we go, back on the beach for the first time.
So a little bit of a surf, not quite Malulaba, but...
Richard Varga first out, no surprises, and it's... So we have 3 guys out in front, then a slight gap back into the chase pack. It's probably going to even out when they go back into the water.
There's not too much to choose between them at the moment, but the second lap tends to be where they get a little bit more strung out.
Fortunately, we don't have any live time at the moment. It's interesting to see where Cameron Worth comes out of the water now, how much he lost 5 minutes to the likes of Alistair Brownlee and John Frodeno in Kona, but that's over 3.8 kilometers, so a very different distance and also intensity level.
It's quite interesting with Richard Varga, isn't it? We saw him racing Tongyong a few weeks ago. He always comes out of the water first 90% of the time. He was 18th in Tongyong, but feels that he needs to build on coming out of the water first, and that's where he feels he was lacking, and said he wanted to improve, and sure enough, he finished in 11th in Miyazaki. So he's gradually seeming to maybe get things going on the bike, and then giving himself a chance at least on the run, because he's not one of the stronger runners. He needs to build up that head of an advantage to really give himself a chance in the race.
He's not a bad runner. When he's on fire, he's actually, you know, a really good runner. But, you know, in the WTS races, we have so many awesome, amazing, you know, speedy runners. Then he doesn't look, he's not up in the top 3, top 5. But he's always like there and around. So in a race like this, I think if he feels like he got an injury-free build-up and a good running block, he's actually, you know, with a slightly reduced main pack, he's up there with, you know, some really, really good runners. So I think that's where he wants to be. He wants to feel like his running is within control, so he can impact the race in the swim, but not be out-counted if he doesn't, you know, be able to break it up 100%.
22nd in Montreal was his best WTS performance this year. So again, another athlete that will be looking to try and better that next year. He's down at 79 in the IT rankings at the moment, Richard Varga. We had an American winner here when it was a Camtra event last year on the American Cup circuit. Will Huffman. Taylor Forbes from Canada was second. Luciano Taccone from Argentina was third. Taccone is in the field this week, just outside the top 100 in the rankings at the moment. Clearly Richard Varga in the red, still out in front.
Someone lost their swim cap, being in the feet on Varga. So, says to me it's been quite a rough race so far. Or he's just, you know, being one of these smarty boys and taking it off somewhere on the lap to cool himself down a little bit.
Yeah, 26 degrees the water temperature, just to remind you. They're on lap 2 of 2, 1,500 metre swim.
26 is, sorry, what normally pools have back home. 26 to 7, so this is like a nice pool swim.
As you can see, there's a long, almost single file at the moment from left to right of that picture as you look at it.
Remember the difference from Lima last weekend, where there were more a big bunch together swimming, 3, 4, 5 athletes abreast. So that's the difference when you have someone like Richard in the field who has that ability to stretch everyone out. And this is a critical point in the race where someone is getting a little bit tired, losing concentration for a few strokes, and there is a gap somewhere. And if you're behind someone who opens up a gap, then you're in trouble, because then you need to swim past and trying to reconnect again and make sure there's no big splits in the field.
So Varga reaching the buoy. They'll take a left turn, 50 metres across between the buoys before heading back to shore. And then out onto the 40-kilometre bike. They're quite long laps on the bike as well, 8.48 kilometres per lap. So it is just over 40 kilometres for the bike. Some pretty good views of the Caribbean as well as you ride along the route. It is a long out and back section along the España Avenue.
Considering the light snowfall in Stockholm this morning, I'm actually quite jealous. It'd be a nice place to be right now.
Well, I was actually having a look, doing a bit of research. I thought we'd do a little bit of a Dominican Republic history lesson for famous people that have come from the Dominican Republic. And there aren't that many that I recognise. There was a singer called Andy Andy.
Okay.
So good they named him twice. Javier Colon, who was the winner of the US show The Voice, and a DJ called Munchie. That's about as good as I could find.
There you go, the top 3 famous Dominican athletes or people. Sorry.
Well, Santo Domingo is one of the Caribbean's oldest cities. It is known as the gateway to the Caribbean as well. It is a very popular destination for holiday makers from around the world. But it's playing home to elite men's and women's triathlon over the next few hours. So, back onto the final part of lap 2 of the swim. Richard Varga still out in front. And as always, we'll be looking for that breakaway at the front, maybe 8, 9, to try and form the pace.
There's no distinct groups or splits so far. It's just a long, long string. But we know that could easily change in the transition area, and also the part where you run up the beach and before you get to transition, because that's if you're tired, if you already have your breath, really maxed out, and you're getting out of the water, starting to run, you have to trying to find your legs and trying to find your breathing pretty quickly, and a lot of athletes can struggle with that. I actually think Varga has a gap now on himself. Is cleared out.
Right. I think he has, hasn't he? He's got maybe 15-20 meters on the athlete behind him.
So you put on the afterburners and really trying to change his race and trying to create something. Being by yourself though is not ideal. Like he would preferably have 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 other athletes with him, because you need someone to work with and share the workload.
Yeah, I think the week before last in Miyazaki we saw a group of cyclists and they were literally overtaking each other one after the other in a kind of almost pendulum-like procession. Nobody was taking sort of a minute at the front. They were all just constantly changing.
Yeah, that's the
and that really helps to build up a good head of steam for that lead group.
Definitely. You want to share the workload. You want to make sure everyone goes to the front and do their, the turn at the front. And you want to keep that rhythm going so everyone is working as much as anyone else. And it's a really quick way, so you get the group going really, really quickly.
And let's not forget the heat is going to play a part as well. It is going to get warm. As I say, it's 23 degrees the air temperature, and it's still only just after 7 o'clock in the morning, 20 past 7 local time.
But I wonder what's happened now. So now it's like they're back together again.
Yeah, it looks like Varga's had that lead eaten into.
Might have a group of 7, 8 athletes there, and then it's a little bit of a more distance to the others.
Quite a strange shape now as they're swimming parallel to the beach. They'll take a right by that red triangular buoy and then head back towards the shore. I'm not too sure that's... Varga's still in there. Varga in the red swimsuit. Not too sure who it was that lost the swim cap fairly early on in the race. In fact, there's somebody else behind with that cap as well, so that doesn't really give us much of an idea.
And here we go, the last bit of surf back into the beach. I wonder if there's anyone able to catch that wave. Actually, the back markers here might be able to get on it and equal out a bit of time.
So it is Richard Varga first out to the water. That's Polyansky, I think. The Russian, Fukuoka from Japan.
Yeah, so you definitely managed to stretch the field here. It's way more spread out than what we saw last weekend. It's quite a rough run into, slightly uphill on sand.
So the transition zone is very close to the beach here, and then quickly out onto the bike. So it is just over 40 kilometers, still that long stream of men coming out of the water. Making sure not to incur any penalties.
So you have to be very tidy in transition area nowadays. You're not allowed to drop anything out of your little... You have a box next to your bike where you're meant to put your swim glasses, your swim cap. When you come back from the bike, that's where you put your helmet. So everything has to go into that box. If you don't, then there's a penalty, which could be very, very expensive and, cost you a lot of time in these kind of races.
There's Rodrigo Gonzalez, the Mexican in the green, just getting onto his bike there, having exited transition. So you can see the board there, 5 laps to go. So 8.48 kilometers per lap. There's still one man coming out of the water.
I wonder if that's Cameron Worth.
Quite difficult to see in the light at the moment as the sun still reaches its intensity. You can see Richard Varga there just sitting back in third in that initial group on the bike, but there's what's that, 5 or 6 in that lead group at the moment, which they might be able to work together. There's a smaller group just behind them, but already they're looking to open up a bit of a gap in the early stages of the 40 kilometers.
So again, this is what... Oh, here we go. Here's... So we're moving up from the back, getting closer to the front. So now we see more the front. There's Richard. So here's the front pack, which is quite large considering how spread out the swim was. It would be awesome with some timings now so we can get all the names.
You got one of the Germans.
Yeah, I wonder if that's
in there. So that looks like there's around about 10 or 12 in that league group at the moment. As you can see, there's the chase group behind another larger group. So, in fact, there's more than 10 or 12 in that group now when you take a look from that angle.
Yeah, I think they're going to definitely catch up. It's hard. With a group that big, you're not going to be able to get that nice kind of moving through the pack and everyone taking their turns. So you're going to have more people sitting up, looking back, looking around to see who's willing to do the work. And it's enough to have a little bit of hesitation, and the people from the back who are chasing, who's already all the time seeing that who's ahead of them, they're much more motivated to catch up. So it's definitely going to turn into be a big pack with the two groups that we see in the picture. And then we can see in the far distance, we can see the third group as well. But it's quite a twisty, turny road. It's not a dead straight road along the beach, which is actually a bit to an advantage for the groups to be able to stay away, because you don't all the time have that person ahead of you into sight. And it's crazy how much that plays into the mentality and the willingness to chase if you can see who's ahead of you.
Here comes our sort of small chase group at the moment. You can see distinct groups being just broken up in the early stages of the bike.
Russell White on the front from Ireland, being nice down an arrow. And they're about to get on this group.
Nobody's really managed to take a good turn at the front and build up any advantage.
The dynamics is interesting in races like this. So obviously, if you are a cyclist, then you have many more cards to play because you don't have to consider the run. Here, all the athletes, they have a 10K run coming up. It's a very, very hot day. So you want to create the best possible setup for yourself. Like, what's the best scenario? How hard can I work? If I work really hard, does the others work hard as well? Or do I have a lot of people just getting on the train and riding for free with me? Which is something that you don't want to achieve. You want to make sure that whatever you're putting down, the others are putting down as well.
I think the motorbike maybe just getting a little bit close to those at the front a moment or so ago, just being ushered out of the way. But, well, they've reached the 180-degree turn at the furthest part of the course. Back along the España Avenue.
Someone just clipped out the pedal, which looked quite uncomfortable. This is Cameron Worth, number 60.
Yeah, it could be 65. Yeah.
So he's probably. Yeah, probably working quite hard now to put himself back into the race after swimming. Unfortunately, we don't have any time, so we don't know what the time split was after the swimming, which would have been very interesting. But he is very much an endurance athlete, so he would know what kind of watts he can push, and he would, steady state ride himself back into the race now. And it's actually a good scenario for him that the group is fairly large at the front, so unless there's a breakaway or someone slipping away, the pace won't be too high here because they have no one to chase. Looks like a beautiful morning.
Yeah, the sun just coming up, so it's going to be a great day in Santo Domingo, that's for sure.
And it's probably still quite nice and cool. It would feel nice with a wind on the bike. The wind chill makes quite a big difference. And once you get on the bike, because you've been in the water for, you know, just under 20 minutes, and you've been standing around in the lineup, you've been getting ready for the race, you know, in about an hour's time, then you had a swim, so you get on the bikes, and now is the time to hydrate. And you want to try to overhydrate a little bit if you can, because once you get to the run is where it gets really warm, you don't have the wind chill, and it's very difficult to drink and take on water while you're running. So every time I do a hot race, my goal is to try to finish off the 2 bottles. To do that, you have to start drinking straight away, so from there starting right now.
We saw Gonzalez from Mexico and Danilo Pimentel from Brazil at the back of the group. But it is one large group now that have come together. Russell White nicely tucked in. We saw him leading the chasers up, of course, to bridge up and make that large group on the first lap. They're still on the first lap. Heading back now towards transition. They've got another 180 turn to negotiate before they complete the first lap. Of course, swings round to the right-hand side, following the contours of the coastline. Will we see anybody try and make a break for it and take people with them? You can see 1 or 2 being quite aggressive at the front, trying to get people to take a turn.
You want to keep the race moving. You want to make sure the pace doesn't, you know, really slow down, or you want to make sure you keep on moving to stay away from that other group that's coming from behind, and actually getting to the run at some point as well. And if you can stay away from, you know, around 30 runners that's behind you, that's quite a nice scenario for a lot of these guys. The less people to start the run with, the better. What do you think? We have about 20 guys?
Yeah, I reckon there's about 20 in there. Just to sort of recap on the season, really. So the top-rated athlete, or top-ranked athlete in the field this week is Mcelroy from the USA. Of course, it's been another great year for Mario Mola, who's top of the ITU rankings. Vincent Louis from France in second, and another Spaniard, Fernando Alaza, topping the top 3 in the rankings this year, in the predominantly racing on the WTS circuit. Of course, Mola did race in Banyoles in Spain, in his home country, a few weeks ago. Certainly Mola continuing the good work done by Javier Gomez, of course, a Spaniard who has dominated the rankings for a number of years.
Yeah, there's always a good Spaniard.
Yes.
Or a bunch of them. Spanish championships would be a difficult one to win.
Yes, it would be very competitive, wouldn't it? That's for sure.
I think they're out on the little autumn back part now. We have the beach on both sides.
Yeah, nice little ride along the harbour. Now, here they come. Completion of lap 1 then. Back over the blue carpet. So, on to lap 2 of 5. Still that large group riding together at the moment.
It's interesting, there's a lot of Americans in this race, and all of them have just had a really good result from one of the World Cups we've been watching. Obviously, Mcelroy and Morgan Pearson, you know, flying in Miyazaki. Last week, in the just missed out on the podium. They're looking super, super strong, and then towards the end, they were, you know, just missing out.
That's Barclay Izzard from Great Britain at the front, just riding on his own at the moment, trying to break away from this pack behind him and maybe bridge up and add another one onto that lead group. He's riding very well at the moment. Hasn't raced since Tishu Avaros back in July, Barclay Izzard. But again, another athlete looking to finish the season strongly. Of course, I'm sure once this race finishes, plans will start to work out who's going to race where in 2020. Now we've got the drone shots of this dramatic coastline here, where they race along the España Avenue. It's 42 seconds between our leaders and our chase group at the moment.
That's manageable for the chasers. So you can see they were looking like they were riding a lot harder than what the front group were. And of course they have a lot to chase for because they need to get themselves back into the race and they want to start the run from, with the first guys. So they don't want to give away any free seconds when they're starting the run. So these guys needs, they will know it's 42 seconds. They would have coaches out there. They were getting the time splits. So for them, it's now important to make sure everyone is willing to work to maintain that gap or even increase it. And they actually look like they're, getting together about this. And the front people are down on the air bars. They're taking, short and nice turns getting to the side. And there's always another athlete filling up from behind, which is a very good sign of a group working well together. It's Ryan Sissons. Duchamp in that group as well. So these are some of the best runners in the sport. I think, was that the chase back we just saw?
Yeah, I think that's our lead group. There's Russell White right in the middle there in the green of Ireland.
It's one of the Americans. It's going to decide. It's always nice if you have a couple of your teammates or buddies in the same group because you all know your goals and you can work together more than if you spread out and you don't know the other athletes that you're racing with. So if you are, 2, 3, 4 athletes from the same training group or from the same nation, it's a huge advantage.
I always remember seeing Alistair and Johnny Brownlee racing together side by side, and if anybody can G anybody up and get a gap, it's those two. I've never seen anybody quite as vocal as them. I remember one race in London a few years ago when it was a little bit wet on the ground as well and slippery conditions, but they were so aggressive in the bike.
Well, I've been doing a bit of riding in Yorkshire now, just a month ago, and it rains so much over there. So if you aren't willing or able to ride your bike in the rain, you would never do any bike training at all.
And it's very hilly as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a super tough kind of environment actually, because you have the long climbs that's super steep, and then you have a lot of short, very punchy climbs. So all the riding gets really, really tough because it's always something coming your way. And then you have the rain on top of that. So of course, it's strong riders, and if you have your brother to race every single day in training, you get to a race and your biggest opponent is your brother, of course the pace is going to be very, very high.
And I suppose when you're training, I mean, from your perspective, what would you prefer if you're trying to build up sort of strength on the bike? Is it a long climb, or is it those short, punchy climbs where you build up a good heart rate for maybe a few minutes and then it drops back down again, or is it a long climb where it's more sustained? What do you feel is more beneficial to an athlete?
Well, so all athletes are very different. Me, myself, I'm a long, steady climb kind of person. I like to be very kind of steady state in my training. And then you have others who are easily, flicking through the gears and accelerations, and they have, pushing really hard gears for a short period of time. And I think, of course, like everything, you should get exposed for everything in training. That will make you a stronger athlete. So if you can mix all these things into your normal training regime, of course, that's absolutely perfect. If I was going to build, big base miles, I'd love to go to a hilly place like, the Pyrenees or the Alps, where you find these long climbs where you can sit for hours, basically.
I was about to say, have you ever done any of the climbs on the Tour de France that they use on a yearly basis? Because they have some fantastic climbs in that particular race.
Yeah, I've done a couple of them. We've been to a couple of different training areas. Morsin, we've been in a couple of years. We have this big famous one at Chouplan. And it's pretty cool because you still have all the writings in the road, and you can see all the teams that's been there. The Pyrenees, you have a couple of good ones too in there where we training, and it's motivating, and you can also, like nowadays, you can look at Strava and see your times compared to the best riders, which is pretty cool as well.
Yes, I got tired just watching the Tour de France, to be honest.
Oh, it's crazy amount of days and riding.
Absolutely. So here's our lead group. We think around about 20 in that lead group at the moment, just in the absence of any live timing coming out of Santo Domingo. You can just see them just pointing, I think, just moving the bike out of the way, making sure there's no danger of that bike getting in the way. They're on lap 2 of 5, just over 40 kilometres, 42.4 kilometres the bike, just because the logistics of the length of the laps, a little bit longer than normal. We know Richard Varga, who led out of the swim, is embedded in that somewhere. There's Danilo Pimentel, who's not riding particularly hard at the moment.
I wonder if something happened here, some mechanical, or if he been down on the ground, minor crash or something. It looks all right, but he definitely doesn't look like he's firing 100%.
Technical problems on the bike, of course, can occur. We've seen a couple of chains come off in the last few weeks that just hold up an athlete, but they're all pretty competent at getting that sorted out. There are wheel stations on the course as well, should they encounter any punches.
But you have to be pretty lucky you have to be close to a wheel station if you want to stay in contention and stay within the race. So if you're unlucky, you get a flat tire and it's on a part of the course where you don't have a wheel station, then it can be quite a while before you actually get a new tire, get a new wheel and can continue riding. There's been some occasions where you've seen athletes time it pretty well, so they can ride. If you have a slow puncture, you can actually ride on it for a while. You get another wheel, you get back, you maybe get into the second pack, and then the second pack catches the front pack, and you're back in the race at the point end. But you need a bit of luck for that to happen.
Yep.
And if anything but a flat tire would happen, then it's difficult to fix. You don't have, like in the Tour, you have to have the cars coming up with a bike mechanic, and they can push you along and they fix your gears or whatever's broken. Here it's up to yourself to fix it. And the race, the pace is so high. So if you have some kind of issue and you're standing on the side for 30 seconds, that's probably your race that's gone by.
Well, nobody's showing any signs of, excuse me, wanting to break away from this group at the moment and try and get a little pocket out in front.
Wouldn't you love like a big hill here or something that would, really decide the race or split it up?
Yeah, they don't look as if they're riding a particularly fast pace at the moment. I assure you they are, but just from the head on camera, it never really looks like they're pushing it perhaps as hard as they can.
Well, there's no point to push it, harder than anyone else, or really, like I'm sure a lot of these guys could go to the front and hammer and keep the pace super high, but it wouldn't benefit them in terms of race plan and setting themselves up for a brilliant run. So you're always judging and trying to feel like, okay, what's my gain here? Mr. Brifford to the right had some couple of solid results during the World Cup season this year.
Yeah, Gomez from Mexico.
Polyansky up on the far left side.
Yeah, only one Polyansky in the field. Dimitri Polyansky was on the list, but didn't appear. Failed to finish last week in Lima, Igor Polyansky. Because the Polyansky brothers have been synonymous in, well, all the big races for a number of years. They've over 100 races each.
It's almost back into... They're getting close to transition here now, right?
Yep, just around this corner they'll see the blue carpet as they go around past the somewhat aged ships, I think it's fair to say, in the harbour.
It's not one of the cruise ships.
I don't think those are seeing much action out on the water at the moment, to be fair. So here they come, the completion of lap 2. We're on to lap 3 then. So we will reach the halfway point of the bike at some point during the course of this race. That's a nice shot with the waves coming onto the beach.
Unfortunately, I don't think they had time to appreciate the greatness of the place.
The race will be finished by about 9 o'clock local time, so 9:30 they'll be sitting with a pina colada somewhere, I should imagine, just thinking, right, that's my season over, feet up.
That's the benefit of an early race.
Yeah, the women to come, of course, they got the short straw. Their race was moved from early morning to a little bit later on. There's not too much of a gap between races, actually, so not much time for the officials, certainly in between races, but we'll bring you all the action, of course, from that race as well.
It's a nice swimming pool they have on the left there. Was it like a military marina, you said?
Yeah, it's a naval officers club, the
wow.
Sanssouci Naval Officers Club. Sounds very posh. I don't think it's a shirt and tie job, I think, to get in there as well. So no t-shirt and trainers, unfortunately.
Hopefully the athletes had access to that one during the week.
Yeah, it looks very... There's some pictures on the internet, actually. It looks very grand. Because this is predominantly a Spanish enclave, Santo Domingo. It was founded by Bartholomew Columbus, the brother of Christopher Columbus.
Huh.
So, younger brother, Christopher Columbus Explorer. What are you going to do? You become an explorer yourself. It's a bit like the Polyansky brothers becoming triathletes. He's like, you're the older brother, I'm a triathlete, I'm going to become a triathlete.
I want to be an explorer.
I want to be an explorer. I want to explore countries.
I wonder if they're like as competitive as the triathlon brothers in terms of exploring.
That's a very good point. 1496 it was discovered. First seat of the Spanish colonial rule in the New World. You see, I've done my homework for this race. I'm making an effort for the final race of the season. But as we say, a very popular destination, as is most of the Caribbean, particularly at this time of year. Of course, winter in Europe and across a lot of states, so always nice to get a bit of winter sunshine.
So we races in both Bermuda now and Dominican Republic.
Yeah.
The IT circuit is, visiting some pretty nice places.
Yeah, the grand final in Edmonton next year on the WTS circuit, and the final race of the World Cup season, as it stands at the moment, will be in Miyazaki, where we were just a couple of weeks ago. So,
there's
two excellent destinations.
A little breakaway attempt by Russell White. So we saw some towards the end of the race in Lima. We had a couple of breakaway attempts with the last one, actually. There was a couple of back and forth, trying hard, being caught by the pack, getting away again, getting caught, and then the third time it got away. So if they have the same kind of tendency here, we might see a little break off the front.
There's certainly a couple of athletes getting up out of the saddle, and you can tell by the way the bike moving from side to side that they're just giving it that little bit of extra effort to try and get away.
Well, sometimes the races towards the end, it's the last race, and you're fit, you've been racing all year, and this might be the race where you're willing to just, try something a bit extra. Can I get away? It might cost me a bit of energy, I might burn myself, but it could also be that one race where I got away with it and, had a fantastic result. So hopefully that, a little bit of end of season, being aggressive, that's something that we really, really like to see, and hopefully they feel like they have.
Well, just in case you're just joining us, don't forget we had one or two late withdrawals to the race for illness and one or two injuries. Rostislav Petsov from Azerbaijan had a bit of an Achilles problem. He was the highest ranked athlete not to come in. Bit of sickness for Tamás Tott from Hungary and Gregor Payet. Bob Haller not racing either, and Dimitri Polyansky not involved in the race either. So if you're fans of those, they're not racing, unfortunately, but there are plenty here vying for gold, silver and bronze in the final race of the season. Just noticed as well going on at the moment, there's the Pacific Island Championships in Tahiti, which is not a bad place to race either. So what's the situation with your racing at the moment? Because I know you raced on the European Cup circuit a little earlier on this year. So what are your plans looking ahead now to 2020 in terms of racing?
So I had, after I was European Cup in Spain, and then I ended up with a bit of calf injury. So I got on my road bike and did a bit of road racing back home, and that ended up giving me a place on the Swedish team for Yorkshire Worlds. So I raced the TT and the road race in Yorkshire in September. And then I continued to do some UCI time trial racing, but now I'm back into triathlon and building my running again. So I'm going to do the 70.3 half Ironman race in Bahrain, and
nice.
Then challenge Daytona to finish off my season.
Very nice. Is the bike your favourite discipline of the three?
Well, you kind of favour what you're good at, right? So the bike, yes, it's what's going quite well for me now. But
good.
I really enjoy the whole the completeness of triathlon and the variation in training, and how it's still fascinating how the running impacts the bike, and the swimming gets impacted from the run and vice versa.
And of course, let's not forget you've got an Olympic silver medal to show for your efforts as well, which is no mean feat.
Yeah, it's what really interests me is how I can continue to improve. So obviously I'm not a youngster anymore. I'm well out of the under 23 and being a newbie on the circuit. So I've done 3 Olympic Games and been around for quite a while. But I still find ways to improve and get better. And I think until I stop finding these ways, that's where it's not interesting anymore. But to be at this kind of age and still, be improving is awesome. And I think why you see a lot of older athletes in the sport as well. and you build up that big bank of endurance. So in the women's race last weekend, you had a lot of, I wouldn't call them older, but they're not the youngest women in the field, and they just show that experience and years of endurance is super beneficial in even the shorter kind of racing as sprint racing and Olympic distance racing.
Yeah, it's almost a role reversal for other sports, isn't it, where you tend to find that younger people excel more at, say, maybe football or sports like that, whereas triathlon, as you say, it's not age, it's the experience of racing, and you know, we see a lot of tactical racing as well, and that only comes with experience. Maybe the younger runners and athletes don't have that experience to know how to time a run or time a bike and that kind of thing, so there are a lot more factors to take into account.
Yeah, I definitely think younger athletes are more keen. They put down, you know, they burn the matches sometimes a little bit too early, and you learn patience and you learn the game by age. I also think how the sport is evolving, and it's now easier to build a career around being an athlete. You look back 20, 30 years, once you're, you know, you train and you're an athlete while you're studying, and then when you're, you know, 25, you're an old athlete and you stop and you move on to have a family, you get a normal day job. But today, your career carries over your whole life, and as long as your head is in the game, you can continue. Like you see with Nicola, you can be a mother of 3, and you can still continue being an athlete on the highest level in the sport. And I applaud triathlon for making that possible and for giving us an opportunity to making it a career. And obviously you have to make some money out of it too, if you're going to continue living like an athlete for that many years.
It's all very fascinating. And Nicola Spirik, you mentioned there, was it 13 weeks from the birth of a third child to racing in Lausanne and the grand final? Fantastic for her to get back into race shape. There's Helvig from Germany at the back of that group. I can tell you that there's a big American contingent in that lead group. Matt Mcelroy, we know all about his prowess over the last few weeks. Morgan Pearson is in there as well. So too Eli Hemming. We've got Richard Varga, who led them out to the water. Crisanto Gralies from Mexico. Max Studer from Switzerland as well. Russell White and Ran Sagiv from Israel are also within that big group as well. So some good runners in there. Sagiv had a great run, of course, in the under-23 race in Lausanne fairly recently when he finished third, took the bronze medal. So on lap 3 of 5, they're past the halfway point on the 40-kilometre bike, well, a 42-kilometre bike as it is at the moment. I can tell you, just for information, it has just been announced that the women's race will be over 5 kilometres with a run due to the heat index at the time of day. So obviously, as we mentioned earlier on, athletes' safety has to be of paramount. So 2 laps on the run as opposed to 3 that we'll see for the men's once they get off the bikes in TT. So they're at the furthest part of the course. They'll head along that little harbour wall before turning back towards transition. And onto the penultimate lap. But as yet, fairly well stretched out now from front to back in that lead group, as you can see, but nobody showing any great signs of wanting to make a breakaway as yet.
It's quite narrow roads here, so they won't have too much space, and with the U-turn, slightly technical section to get back in through transition, it's, you know, a one run, and you can see the accelerations here. It's getting really strung out, and they have to work pretty hard. This is what's very, very different from Ironman. So going back to Cameron Worth and the kind of intensity and how you race in Ironman. In Ironman, you're kind of within yourself the whole time. You know exactly how hard you can go, and it's almost as much hydration and nutrition as well as, you know, intensity control and maintaining that. Here, you can't control your intensity. You have to go with whoever is in front of you and who dictates the pace. So it's a lot of time where you're completely out of your comfort zone, and then you have to try to recover. And the strongest athletes, they decide the intensity.
So we've got a couple of Mexicans in that lead group as well. Crisanto Gralies, Rodrigo Gonzalez. Be interesting to see. The heat should suit them.
Yeah, very much so. Grajales always have very good runs when in hot conditions, which I believe you get, you know, well used to if you train in Mexico. We had a grand final in Cozumel a few years back in 2016, and it's one of the hottest races ever raced, I think, with a few people collapsing in the junior races, and again, a race that was pushed to very, very late in the evening. They choose there to make sure the temperature had cooled down slightly and was as comfortable as possible. Looks like they're maintaining a similar distance to the chase groups. I think it was a similar time when they got through transition on the last lap. And they can see, with the U-turns, they can see where the chases are on every lap. So the athletes, with the coaches and with the visuals, they would know exactly what's happening behind them.
So that is the big chase group. Two pretty big groups at the moment, predominantly. They were 38 seconds down, I think, the last time.
You can almost see how it's warming up now. It's starting to look a lot warmer. With the reduced running format like the women will have today, it's exactly the same they had in the Testament in Tokyo, with also shortened the run to 5Ks. So some of them would have raced over. It's actually a slightly different format because the swim and the bike is the same distance and the run is half. I don't think it would change the race and the outcome of the race too much, but obviously it's a bit of a change that you need to wrap your head around and trying to adapt to when you're racing. So now they're lapping the first athlete here. So unfortunately, if you're lapped, you're not allowed to continue the race, but you have to step aside and return your timing chip and get out of the race. That's a safety issue because you don't want to have lapped athletes on the course.
So they will take the bell the next time they come back round through transition. And that's when our strong runners will start to be thinking ahead to things. Gonzalez from Mexico has been at the back of that group pretty much every time we've seen him, so he's not that bothered about taking a turn out the front. Just nice to stay in touch at the moment.
That's like buying a bus ticket.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that Savisberg, I think, from...
Flory.
Yeah, Florian, who was second last week. So that quite emotional interview as well, wasn't it? When a few tears thanking his friends and family and everybody for their support. One of a number of Savisberg brothers.
I think they're 5 brothers, if I'm not mistaken. All super talented and very strong swimmers, all of them. Andrea is the one we normally see on the WTS circuit.
Jan Villar from the Czech Republic just on the outside as well of that particular group. There's Russell White in the green.
He's been very aggressive this race, hasn't he? I've seen him a lot in the front and also trying to create situations, getting a small pack off the front here.
Yeah, he's exactly number 100 in the ITU rankings, Russell White, so I'm sure he'd like to finish the year inside the top 100.
So normally with the smaller nations that wouldn't have too many athletes out there racing, it's mainly making the Olympic qualification criteria. So you want to make sure that you qualify your nation to get a slot. That way you would be pretty sure that you have a slot and it's up to the Olympic Committee to then select you. For countries with more super talented athletes, like you see the Americans, they now have, or I know they want to have 3 in the top 30, which means they would have 3 slots at the Olympic Games. Then the qualification turns into a slightly different phase, because then you're more racing your fellow competitors about a slot. So they might have certain races where it's actually, this is a qualification race, so you have to be the best American, or if you get a top 3 or top 8 here, that means you are qualified. So it's slightly, or it's very, very different criteria for different countries. But with the smaller nations, you could more see them racing for points and for placings on the general rankings. So for me, it's always, obviously coming from Sweden, we don't have too many athletes out there, so I needed to make sure I qualified Sweden for a nation slot. And then I needed to impress my Olympic committee, but they were pretty hard, so I still needed to get a top 8 in the WTS races to qualify. So it wasn't just okay, Sweden have a slot, I qualified Sweden, can I go? But they was like, no, you need to be, you know, world class. You need to be able to go there and prove that you're, you know, one of the best athletes. And that's how they do across all the sports. So everyone going from Sweden to the Olympics have at some stage had a top 8 in the, you know, highest level of racing that you can have. But it's very, very different from different Olympic committees in different countries, how they decide and what they think is fair.
Well, let's not forget on that as well. Of course, we've got the mixed relay in the Olympic Games next year for the first time as well, and the mixed relay forming a big part of, as you say, those spots for the NOCs, for the Olympic committees. We've got the positions from the rankings up to the 31st of March 2020, and countries that haven't qualified via that, they've got that qualification mixed relay event in Chengdu. So that'll be a fascinating weekend there, with probably countries like Ireland involved, who have been involved in a lot of the mixed relays this year, just trying to find a team that can actually get them into a position where they can pick up Olympic places.
And you might also see teams that haven't been on that team circuit. And then Norway will try to put in a team, maybe Sweden will try to put in a team, so that's the chance for the teams who haven't been able to afford to go around to race the team circuit, or haven't really had athletes or opportunity to do it. Actually, I read last week in Germany, they will have a qualification race in Germany for the last 2 places. So they will actually have 2 places up for grab with Germans racing.
Winner take all?
Yeah.
Wow.
Basically. And they would go off on a time distance. So they would, you know, have a 30-second gap, one to go, and it would be about the time you can do over a super sprint distance. So it's not like face-to-face racing. It's about setting a really good time, proving that you can be the best team athlete for Germany. So that's changing a lot now from the races we've seen before in Rio or London or Beijing. There's another lapped athlete. Yeah,
another athlete who obviously had pretty much given up anyway, was riding just out for a Sunday stroll, really, just a little leisurely ride in Santo Domingo, just been passed by the rest of the pack. So obviously when he makes his way back to transition, he'll rack his bike back and collect his belongings, and off he goes.
Well, it's if you not have one of the best swims, or if you know you're a developing athlete, you haven't been racing so much on the World Cup circuit, you might be local, so you have an opportunity and a place to start. But if you can't make that swim group and you're left by yourself after the swim, it's very, very difficult to make your way back into the race. And you see this group obviously working together, moving really quickly. They were pretty quick, turn over a lot of ground, so you know it's easy when you lose contact to get laps. And it's a shame, you know, for athletes. You want everyone to be able to finish. At the same time, it's, you know, he probably had an awesome opportunity to be on the start line and to do the swim and get as far as he could on the bike.
I'm just wondering, when they do come off the bike, they've still got 1 lap to go, of course. We might eventually see 2 teams running here, because we've got quite a big American contingent, Mcelroy, Pearson and Hemming within that group. And the Mexicans, of course, who are desperate for points. They've been racing quite a lot over the last few weeks, back-to-back since Y-High, the Mexicans, in a bid to pick up more points.
Wow. That's a lot of racing. It's interesting to see all the Americans together here, and they're all really good runners.
Yeah, we saw them running together a couple of weeks ago. Well, Eli Hemming, of course, came in second in Miyazaki behind his teammate Matt Mcelroy. So here they come to take the bell. Just round past the Rusty Boat. And 1 lap to go. 8.48 kilometres before they head back to T2. So we still haven't really seen a split in that lead group. They've tried a couple of times, maybe 1 or 2 have just tested the pace a little bit.
So if you don't get a split early, as in straight after the swim, it's with this kind of course, which is fairly flat, it's not that exposed, it's not that technical, it's very difficult to ride someone off your wheel. The only way to do so is if people are not interested at all to go with you, which here obviously is not the case. You're not going to let anyone up the road and give them seconds for free. But on the last lap, it could actually be an opportunity if you're willing to put your head down and work really hard. And if you can create something like 30-40 seconds, that's, you know, a huge advantage when you start the run. You also get into transition with a clear run. You don't have to fight anyone in transition. You have a smoother run in probably quicker transition, and you can relax and start running at your pace, and it will take the boys, you know, quite a while to catch you, if they catch you.
Just briefly going back to that Olympic qualification again, just to sort of give you a little bit of a breakdown of those 55 places in each race that are up for grabs. As we said, Japan have got 2 as the host nation. The bulk of the rankings, 26 places for individual rankings, that's individual world rankings, 14 places as part of the mixed relay rankings, and then a further 6 from that mixed relay event, which will be in Chengdu. So you can see that Chengdu race will be very, very exciting next year. It's part of the World Cup Series, of course. We saw it this year in the individuals with the semi-finals and the finals format over the super sprint and sprint distance, which was very exciting. One of the many races we brought you this year on TriathlonLIVE.tv, and of course we'll continue to do more next year. We brought you 17 World Cups. We brought you all the WTS series plus races from around the world. When you look at the Asian circuit, the Oceania circuit, the European circuit, there's a phenomenal amount of triathlon races around the world these days on a weekly basis now.
Yeah, you could race triathlon year-round, no interruptions if you wanted to. Such different from when I started. But of course, you always had different seasons in triathlon. The Japanese have the season during, you know, the Japanese season. Australians, they're starting their season in November, December, and continuing when the European athletes traditionally have their break, and the Europeans start in April, May with their season. Now with the travels and, you know, how we live these days, you can actually race whenever you want it across the year. And that's where we see, you know, a bit of a difference at the circuit, with some athletes choosing to prolong the seasons and race quite late. Like being out here in November is quite late, considering the season started in March already. But then you have some athletes that might be out with an injury, or, you know, for some reason they haven't been able to race as much as they wanted earlier on, or they decided that because athletes are tired and I'm pretty fresh, this is a perfect opportunity to get some points.
I mean, again, I was looking at the rankings earlier, the likes of the Marianne Mohlers of this world, who obviously are at the top of the elite field in terms of WTS racing. So they only probably race maybe 9 or 10 times a year because they know that they can pick up enough ranking points within those races. As an athlete, when you were racing, what for you was an ideal number of elite races per year? Did you have a set number, or a number that you were comfortable with across a 12-month period?
Not really. It's more that you race. You also have to pick the World Series races. You might not race all of them, but you want to have, you know, 1 or 2 extras above the 5 that you count, and then you want to have maybe a warm-up race. Then there might be a, you know, Bundesliga race or a French Grand Prix race to keep you fresh or get some extra money. So you would have, you know, your WTS would be your bulk and your main races, but then you might be able to add some races around that. And I would actually like to pick some races for fun by the end of the year, where I'm really fit. You don't have to train so much, but you can maintain that fitness, and you can pick up some fun locations or cool races and just enjoy being a triathlete as well.
And I'm sure Santo Domingo would have been on that list if you were racing this year.
Definitely would have. But then it's also important to get that downtime and get that break.
Yep.
So I was always quite cautious and planned carefully to have 3 or 4 weeks where you don't have a scheduled session, you don't have to get yourself down to the local pool and do a 1 or 2 hour session with the swimming club, and to just have that time where you can rest your brain and then start the year fresher and get on with the base training that you have to do to set yourself up in a good way.
So we understand our chase group are a little over 2 minutes down now on our leaders.
Oh,
so
wow.
They've made a big gap, so the lead group have been perhaps moving a little bit faster than we thought.
So 2 minutes is a big distance on the run.
Just a little bit more information that I've been given on Christian Worth as well. Cameron Worth, sorry, we were talking about him earlier, the Australian. He was a professional rower.
Oh, as well?
Before he
wow.
returned to cycling and then triathlon. He went to Athens for rowing.
Wow.
So that's pretty impressive.
Super talented.
Absolutely.
Very much.
Absolutely. We're not too sure where he is in this race at the moment. As we say, we haven't got any live timing coming out of the Caribbean at the moment, so we're pretty much working on what you're seeing the same as we are at the moment, but we'll try and see if we can find out how he's doing. But we're on the final lap before the 10-kilometre run. The men's race is still a 10-kilometre run, despite the fact the women's has been reduced by half because of the heat. Be interesting to see the air temperature once the women get underway. It was 23 in the men's race when we started at 7 AM local time. It's just after 8 AM now, and as you can see, it's got considerably brighter. The sun starting to rise, making some lovely shadows on the road. But it's been, well, I suppose in a way it's been a fairly uneventful bike. We've seen that big group. They came together fairly early on, the chase group led by Russell White, who closed up to make that big pack and big peloton you can see at the moment. And again, it looks like we're going to come down to the run, and we know how strong those Americans are. Matt Mcelroy, who decided to take a break last week in Lima after winning 2. So, I mean, he's looking for 3 in a row, so he's got the incentive of finishing the season with a hat-trick of wins, which is a great incentive.
Very much so, very much. And also the confidence from the last races that, you know, he knows he's one of the best runners, and he knows he's on very, very good form. You couldn't really wish for more when you get into a race. But there's a lot of guys with good confidence here, and, you know, increasing form, and they prove themselves. Like, I think Salvisberg from last weekend would have gained a lot of confidence in his running, knowing he can run with, you know, some of the best runners in the world. And there'd be, you know, a lot of guys who be willing to challenge the Americans for it.
I think one thing we've seen over the last couple of weeks as well is that someone has really taken the run by the scruff of the neck as well. They've really gone half at a high intensity, and you know, Messiah's timed it perfectly last week with his break just in the last 200 meters really to get down the finishing chute, and knew exactly the right time to kick a new one. He knew no one was going to catch him, so again, be interesting to see the tactics here over the 10 kilometers.
Yeah, definitely. Like, if the bike seems like a little bit hesitant sometimes, the run is not. The run is opposite. It goes out all out from the start. And what we see also from the finish, like, if you manage to hang on, you can actually be the one who looks like you're going to fall off at any time, and the one who doesn't look so good. And then you get down, you know, within 400 or 500 meters on the finish line, and suddenly they're back in and they're winning the sprint. So no one is out or counted out until, you know, if you can make it to that last bit, it's pretty much everyone's race.
Just mentioning Messias again, let's not forget he won the under-23 men's race in Monterrey, and he finished 3rd in Hutalco in heat as well. So maybe these warm, hot conditions will suit him as part of the Brazilian contingent. We've got Mexicans in there as well, who we know are extremely proficient on the run. And as I say, that big American contingent as well, Mcelroy, Pearson and Hemming, all in that lead group at the moment. And no doubt Kevin McDowell, who finished 4th in Lima last week, 3rd in Tongyong and 4th in Weihai, is also there or thereabouts, you would imagine. So we'll see when they come back to T2. They're in the final stages of the 40-kilometer bike. Just a couple more turns before they head along the dockside and then turn onto the blue carpet.
But I think for McDowell, nothing motivates you so much to go one better than, you know, a lot of 4th places. Yes. 4th place is probably the worst place you can have as an elite athlete. To be on that podium, to be, you know, getting the not only the checks but the prize, the champagne and the flowers and the recognition, that's what you're racing for. Well,
he has had 2 bronze medals this year in Cagliari and in Tongyong, but he's also had 2 4th places as well. He hasn't managed to get a silver medal yet this year. Just 2 races on the WTS circuit this year for Kevin McDowell. Failed to finish in Lausanne and 41st in Montreal. So he'd love to finish the season with his best performance in a World Cup race. But he's got big competition, you can be sure of that. So here comes our big group. And despite the fact they've ridden together pretty much for 40k, if you've not seen some of these races before, they will get stretched out on the run very, very quickly. Final few meters then. And past the ships in the harbour, here they come.
These are crucial meters. This is where you don't want to be too far back. You want to be near the front so you can have a prime position when you start running into the transition area. It's actually quite a long run because I'm going to go around the U-turn as well.
And the main thing is now remembering what number you are, where your bike needs to be racked. So here they come. It is quite a tight transition zone here. As you see, they just have to round that corner.
This is a problem. If you're too far back, you're going to be caught up by athletes ahead of you going left or right, or trying to find the right position. If you're among, you know, 1 or 2 among the first athletes in, then you have a clean run. You can just pick out your place, get your shoes on and start running.
So all seem to have had a pretty good transition. Gomez from Mexico just going through. He was at the back of the bike for pretty much the whole race. He has got a couple of other Mexicans in there in Gralias and Gonzalez if he wants a bit of company on the run. But as you can see already, there's a reasonably long gap from start to finish within that particular group. Quite difficult to just see with the shadows with trees, quite tree-lined along part of this run course. So once again, they follow the España Avenue, not quite as far as they go on the bike before they do a 180-degree turn and then head back. So 3 laps of 3.33 kilometers per lap.
I always like that. 3 laps instead of 4. Feels like it goes by a lot quicker. You do 1 and then you only have 2 to go. It's perfect. Someone is taking this out pretty quick. So the difficult, when it's this warm and humid, if you go out too quick, if you don't do the pacing perfectly, it's going to cost you quite a lot towards the end. So if you have the possibility to start out, you know, you always saw with Gwen Jurgensen, she was coming from behind, she always started running what looked really slow. It's like, you know, doesn't she want to go with all the others? But then on the second half, she was, you know, accelerating just a little bit, while others weren't able to maintain the pace. So she would like come through the field and be the strongest towards the end. So hot races, you always have to be careful.
So just taking on some liquid from one of the watering stations.
So Brifford first from Switzerland. Yep.
Yep, Adrian Brifford.
Brilliant
There's
transition.
Mcelroy just behind him on the shoulder.
And Mcdowell is behind. Oh, sorry. No, Pearson. Sorry, Pearson. And then by Flory Salvisberg.
Studer from Switzerland, Max Studer in the red. So good Swiss representation in this group. So it is almost like a team race at the moment. We've got lots of Mexicans, lots of Americans, lots of Swiss.
You would think they would like hilly and cold races from Switzerland, not like flat and hot ones.
Well, when they run in the hills, I should imagine running flat is quite a blessing in disguise for them, really.
Well, it's slightly different running techniques. So to run really good uphill doesn't mean you're a good, you know, flat runner. But obviously, like guys on this level, they can run, you know, flats and hills and downhills.
Well, Max Studer does a lot of training in Australia, apparently, so he's used to the heat. He was 4th in Tongyong, 2nd in Weihai, so he has had a podium finish this year.
And then you can have athletes being growing up in cold conditions, but really, really liking hot conditions, and vice versa. So it's more of how your, you know, body type, and if you, like Studer, been training in Australia and you've been acclimatized, then it's easier to go back into the heat and racing in hot conditions.
So Studer just comes to the front. It's Mcdowell with the white visor. That trio of Americans in that lead group.
So Mcelroy, Pearson and Mcdowell together. So it's 3 Americans and 3 Swiss.
Yeah, Pearson was 5th last week, so again, just finishing off the podium.
He said it was going to be a team race between Mexico and the US, not Switzerland and the US.
Well, the Mexicans are in there somewhere, but I think they've dropped back a little bit. I wasn't expecting Switzerland to be so prominent in this
Oh, look at her.
group.
True athlete spirit, just handing over water bottles to whoever's next to you. Didn't get a bottle at the aid station. It's beautiful to see. Is it Eli Hemming coming up from behind?
Yeah, looks like another American.
It's trying to make his way up.
Are we going to see USA dominance in the race? As we said, it was an American winner when they raced on the Camtry American Cup circuit last year. Will Huffman taking the gold medal.
This is like a new level of team relay.
Yes.
They're all running together, not one-on-one.
Well, there's a bit of a gap open up, as you can see. That looks like one of the Mexicans in the front of that chase group just behind them.
It's quite nice to early get into a group, and like once this group has established, you can, you know, find a rhythm and trying to find yourself and relax and do all the little bits right that you need to do to run well. They came through an aid station here, grabbing some bottles. It's important to trying to maintain the hydration, but also it's an opportunity to cool yourself off a little bit. We're moving up from behind.
Well, this will be potentially a big race for Matt Mcelroy, who at the moment is the top-ranked USA athlete at 18 in the rankings. Another good position, a good performance for him here will lift him a little bit high. Morgan Pearson, 24th, Eli Hemming, 26th. So he knows his teammates are a little bit congested behind him. He'll be focusing on making sure he gets the right result.
So I think for the Americans, they want to make sure that they have 3 guys in the top 30. So they want to have three athletes in Tokyo. But of course, I'm sure there's a bit of competition between these boys as well. And you always want to finish on top of the ranking if you're like within your country. So Eli has made his way back into the pack and just staying there. So if you, so he had to work a little bit harder to get back up to that group. So he's pretty smart now and just trying to stay at the back and do as little as he can for a little bit. You have to feel really good to catch up to a group and then go straight past it. Like we saw Messias did last week, didn't he, when he came from behind and started to push a pace.
Absolutely. Despite the fact the Americans have done so well over the last few weeks, none of the top 3 there at the moment, Mcelroy, Pearson or Hemming, did particularly well in the Tokyo test event. Mcelroy was 16th, Pearson 25th, and Eli Hemming was 27th. So they had a look at the course. They'll realise what aspects of their sport they need to work on, maybe to shave some seconds off the time to be competitive when it comes to Tokyo next year. Certainly here they've all been in pretty good form of late. Those 2 wins, as we say, for Mcelroy, a 5th place last week for Pearson. Hemming was 2nd in Miyazaki, 5th in Tongyong, so all finishing the season in positive fashion.
And it's interesting, you normally get, training groups delivering at a similar kind of level. So you can see on a whole group if they really hit the target and if they, nailed what they needed to nail to do well in racing. And sometimes if you're a little bit off or you haven't, really prioritized or done what you needed to do, normally the whole group as such, are slightly lower on the results. So that could be the scenario for, say, Tokyo, or they didn't prioritize it as much. Their mission was to go there and check out the course.
Yep.
Most teams went to see the village and checked out a training site for where they're going to base themselves before the games. So it's very much also a sightseeing trip,
yep.
So to say.
So it is USA against Switzerland. Our 6 have built up a head of steam. They've opened up a bit of a gap now between those chasers. And it's going to take a big effort from someone to try and break into this 6 and try and steal a podium place, because at the moment, these 6 looking like they're going to be vying for the 3 medals.
Yeah, at the moment they're running a lot faster than the chase group. And I can see Eli Hemming is struggling a little bit now. So it looks like he's going to be the first one to fall off the group, which I think is going to be the scenario. It's going to whittle down from this group into the favorites. You're not going to have a super move from behind, but this is where the medals are going to be handed out.
So coming towards the completion of the first lap, 2 laps to go when they come back through transition. Bit of
downhill running, which is a bit of an art to do well.
And Mcelroy looking strong at the front of the field. Picked up the silver medal in Leeds on the WTS this year as well, so he's also competed in one of the bigger events. So here they come.
Turn into transition. So now it's a Briford who lost contact, and now Eli Hemming is...
Yeah, Hemming just dropped as well, so, but you can see now how big that gap is.
Oh wow, it's blown apart the race.
It's going to be about 20-30 seconds, I think, back to those chasers, and that's a big gap already opened up on the opening lap of 3.
And these boys are not running slow. It's pretty good pace here. So it shows how quick these front 6 guys are moving. The risk is if you're gone out a bit too hard, and if you gone out with these the best runners in the race, and you're starting to feel the heat, you're starting to suffer a little bit, then if you get the hammer, you can fall pretty deep down through the field. So I think this is what that second group is hoping for, that they plan this race better and they set themselves up to run a very, very solid and consistent 10K.
So all pretty running in single van der Steel from the Netherlands, so running single file at the moment. So Matthew Wright from Barbados in the blue just going through as well.
So back with the leaders. So it's Studer and Salvisberg left of the Swiss boys, and all Americans but Eli Hemming. So we have always crossing over quite a bit into the oncoming lane. So I wonder if they have 3 American flags or 3 Swiss flags, if all 3 of them were to be on the podium.
Someone will be racing around pretty quickly trying to find that out, I should imagine, at the moment.
I know that was a big problem in Bermuda 2 years ago, where the 3 Norwegian boys made the podium, but they only had 2 Norwegian flags. Because it never ever happened before they needed 3 Norwegian flags. But ITU is all about problem solving, so they ended up finding a 3rd flag and had the presentation.
Finding a flag shop in Bermuda would be quite difficult, I would think, probably on a Sunday as well, which was not ideal.
But luckily there was a Norwegian mother out on the course with a flag on her own, so they borrowed that one. But I'm sure they have 3 American ones and probably 3 Swiss flags as well.
Well, we'll see. So we're on the second lap of 3. Matt Mcelroy, no stranger to winning. He's got that winning mentality. Morgan Pearson just alongside him, and Kevin Mcdowell tucked in behind. Max Studer, so that training in Australia will come into its own with the heat increasing as the hours go by.
So anyone who's racing with Tokyo in mind would have given heat training a bit of thought. Most athletes have probably done some kind of heat acclimatization or spent a lot of time into a heat chamber, if not from a hot country. So this is probably also a perfect opportunity to trial and error to see what works for you and what makes you able to run fast even if it's very hot and humid conditions. So all 3 Americans towards the pointy end of this pack. That's another from the Swiss athletes who've fallen off the pack slightly.
Yeah, I think it's Studer that's staying with them, isn't it? So Brifford it was that one of those to drop off.
So Americans are grilling the pace here. But it's Mcelroy the whole time who's setting the pace and deciding, you know, the amount of pressure.
Well, it's quite formidable to see 3 athletes from the same country running together, because you know they're going to work in harmony with each other.
But I would say here on the run course, they're not so much buddies anymore. Now you have a podium in sight, and it's, you know, but what you can do. And it's always nice and cool to race with your fellow competitors and friends and buddies, but here I think they're running for the fame and the glory.
We could well see the potential for an exciting sprint between those 3. Max Studer is the man that could potentially throw a spanner in the works for an American clean sweep. And Will Huffman took the victory in the American Cup event here last year.
So far end of the course, but halfway through the 10K. It's nice acceleration there out of the corner, the turn. It's a good way too to put some pressure on your competitors running behind you. Just put the accelerator a little bit when you go out, and you force the guys behind you to do the same. So where's Studer? Can't see his shoes.
Yeah, he's dropping back, Studer. Well, Mcelroy ran a superb race. Eli Hemming stayed with him for a little bit in Miyazaki, but it was at a 27-second gap for Mcelroy in the end. He was strong throughout. He never let his pace up. He was relentless throughout the 10 kilometers. That was over the Olympic distance, of course, in Japan, before we switched from east to west. Decided to take a break last week in Lima and recharge the batteries, and that seems to have been a good decision so far. Morgan Pearson did race last week. He doesn't seem to have shown any ill effects, but didn't race in Miyazaki, so obviously a lot of planning has gone into the races for these guys. Max Studer, as you can see now, has been left behind, and these Americans are all really dominating now. Lap 2 of 3. It's a good pace as well.
So I wonder now, when the three of them are together and they've gotten rid of all the Swiss boys, are they going to ease up and kind of like, okay, it's the three of us, let's make this a bit more comfortable, and then let's do the sprint? Or is Mcelroy going to, keep pushing that accelerator and keep asking the questions if anyone can go with him?
Well, Mcelroy's run split when he won in Miyazaki was 30 minutes and 5 seconds. He was 39 seconds faster than Andreas Schilling from Denmark, who ran the second fastest run split. So you can see that Mcelroy came out with a clear plan in mind there, and he seems to have done the same here. And it'll be interesting to see if his teammates can stay with him, because Hemming obviously has dropped off already, but what can Pearson and Mcdowell do to stay with him?
And the latest results is like, you can go to a race and you can have a subpar performance, and then you show up 2 weeks later and you feel much better, and you had a couple of sessions under your belt that made you, find that last gear. So I'm sure the other two boys could probably impress or have lifted themselves since the last race. But I don't think Mcelroy is slowing down here. I think he's going to push it hard all the way, and I guess too, it's nothing beats coming into the finish shoot and being by yourself, and you can relax and celebrate that last little bit, which is what everyone wants to do, really. So no reason to slow down now and make it a sprint finish.
It's his 40th race on the ITU circuit, Matt Mcelroy. 13 podiums and 3 wins previously. So 2 of his wins have come in his last 2 races, so
it's really hitting form.
Absolutely. At the right time as well, going into an Olympic year. I know we keep saying it, but 2020, of course, the goals changed slightly with Tokyo looming in August.
But it's a big difference to be on form now compared to be in form in August next year, because you're going to have an off-season, you're going to have some downtime, then you're going to have a build-up. Olympic years are different. There's a lot of tension, there's a lot on the line. So you would see a lot of athletes pushing it a little bit too far, because you want to do that in extraordinary, you want to make yourself the best you possibly can, which is invitable then for injuries or overtraining. So it's a difficult year to get right. You want to be at your best, but you don't want to risk anything on the way there.
So they're coming round to take the bell. They'll round the corner at the end of this short little harbour wall before turning back across the blue carpet. And it's 3.3 kilometres to decide the destination of our medals. It's going to be a USA 1, 2, 3, but which order is it going to be? Is Mcelroy going to end the season with 3 consecutive wins? Is Morgan Pearson going to get a gold medal? Or is Kevin Mcdowell going to get his best result of the season, having got 2 bronzes in Tongyong and Calgary? A lot to be decided over the next few minutes.
If you're an American coach, you probably deserve a beer tonight, I think.
And what better place to do it? On the beach, probably, watching the sun go down. So it's just 8:30 in the morning here as well, so it's still very early, the whole day ahead. Just wonder if this pace will tell, though, whether they'll just slow down slightly. They've taken the bell. There's a lot of athletes behind them, but they're a long, long way behind our front 3.
Yeah, it's crazy how big the distances have gotten. Really blew up this race from the start of the run.
Well, Well, no time to take in those stunning views at the moment, not when you've got two teammates for company. Certainly has been a great location, though, for the race. It's why it's attracted such big fields. We've got a 60-plus field in the elite women's race coming up as well. Just to remind you, the run will be 5 kilometers in the women's race due to the heat index. So the athlete's safety has to be of paramount importance when it gets too hot.
That sound of the bell is something that's like music to your ears as an athlete. Just one more lap to go, then it's all over.
Yeah, you can still hear it going in the background, and our leader's probably passed it, what, about 2 minutes ago?
Yeah.
Wouldn't fancy being the bell ringer.
No, it's a big job.
It's a long job at times as well. Well, these guys looking strong. You can see the different pace they're running to the other athlete that just ran the other way, who's still coming round to complete his second lap. But these guys are metronome-like at the moment, all running pace for pace. I say we saw Messias time his run, the Brazilian, last week to take the victory in Lima. Who's going to make a break here, I wonder?
Yeah, unfortunately no Messias and no Duchamp here this
Nope.
week, like we saw last weekend. I think that's the difference with a Varga in the swim, who would push a pace, and it would split that field into bigger distance. Like last weekend was more a composed field coming out of the swim when they were all together. It's Pearson pushing the pace now. I wonder if it's being a bit tactical here. Mcelroy is going back, taking a breather, sitting on someone's shoulder. It's, you have a little bit of an advantage as well, just on the bike, to be on someone's shoulder, be behind someone, but 10%. So it's a nice tactical move if you want to save yourself a little bit.
So Pearson looks to be grimacing a little bit more than the other two at the moment. Mcdowell looks very cool.
But it's one thing you can never trust in running is someone's facial expressions, because you can have athlete looking at the absolutely dying, and then they putting in an attack or just keep on running amazing, and you have the the cold look, the blue steel kind of face,
yeah,
who suddenly just dies and there's nothing there. So a lot of athletes have very good game faces where you wouldn't let anyone know how you're feeling.
If I had to put you on the spot as to who you think might take this gold, who would you go with? Would you go with the man in form?
Yeah, I would probably go for Mcelroy here. He looks composed, he has that confidence, he wants to make it 3 in a row. He has everything to run for.
Well, of course, we've been enthusing over the last few weeks over Ayueda in the women's racing. Matt Mcelroy doing his bit in the men's. If he can take gold, it would be 3 consecutive victories for him. Tongyong, Miyazaki. And now here in Santo Domingo. Wonderful season coming to an end for these athletes. So there are still other races that will still go on around the world in the various codes.
So this is a moment when you're feeling within yourself, you're all the time kind of reading off your parameters. How am I feeling? How am I breathing? How is my footwork, my cadence, my rhythm? And you at the same time trying to hear the guys around you. Are they suffering now? And if you feel at some time they're really suffering and they're hurting and you feel really good, that's the time when you put some more gas on and you're trying to stretch it or trying to get away from them. And you go through patches. You go through patches where you feel rough and you feel like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to do this. It's not there. And then you get it back and you're on top of it again and you feel like you might have a chance to do something. So it's basically a mental battle here.
Yeah, sometimes it's just timing that kick and knowing that your opponents aren't going to be able to react in the same sort of time, because once you've got away, if you can maintain that pace, they'll all know, of course, their own capabilities, and they'll all know their opponents' capabilities, particularly in this race, coming from the same country. Whatever happens, the Star Spangled Banner will be played a little bit later on.
And if you know that you're not a great kicker, you know that you don't have the best sprint out of these three, then you probably want to make a difference once you turn at the far end of the course. You want to make a difference, and you want to make sure you don't run all the three of you together into the finish chute. That bell is still ringing.
It's still ringing. I was just about to say. The poor bell ringer. Oh, I think he stopped. That must have been 5 minutes that bell's been going for since our leaders passed through transition. Just shows the speed and the pace which they've gone off at.
So they know once they turn the U-turn, they have a K.5 to go, roughly, back to the finish line.
It'd be interesting to know how far back our three Swiss athletes are as well now, because they raced together, didn't they, for pretty much the whole of the first lap, and then all of a sudden, one by one, they just started dropping off the back, as he did Eli Hemming, of course, who was a fourth American.
Here we go.
Now Mcelroy looks like he's gone. Mcdowell's going with him. It looks like it's Pearson that's the man suffering just on the inside at the moment, but Mcelroy looking strong and already opening up a gap. Now, has he gone too early? That's the question. There's still quite a way to go.
You know, I think he was feeling good. He sat back, he got out of the wind, he got his breath back, he relaxed a little bit, and now he's, you know, it's full. Everything is open here. It's full gas. And you see what a distance he opened up. It was only a few strides and there was a gap, and the gap is growing bigger and bigger.
Well, as you can see already, you don't get a proper appreciation from the head-on camera, but that's a big gap built up by Mcelroy over such a short period of time as well. So he finished 27 seconds ahead of Eli Hemming in his last race in Miyazaki. What sort of a gap are we going to get here? They haven't got too far to go. They're coming up towards the final kilometre. But it looks very much at the moment as if Matt Mcelroy is going to end the season with 3 consecutive wins.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's no doubt who's the strongest today. And look at the rhythm and some nice running. Still relaxed and very, very rhythmical.
And credit to his team as well, because it might have been quite tempting to go to Lima last week and race, having been in such good form, but opting to take a rest, having won an Olympic distance and a sprint distance race, and now coming back a week off, fresher, and looking very, very strong. Great tactics by them in terms of picking their races.
Yeah, it's probably like a very smart coaching and rehab team around him, deciding what's manageable in terms of traveling and racing. Still get, you know, you might feel like you need a bit of a block, or you might need to go home for a little bit to rest your brain and rest your body. And they've done it perfectly.
So here he comes, Matt Mcelroy, down the little harbour road for the final time. He'll turn the corner and he'll see the finishing chute. And it'll be the familiar sight over the last few weeks of the USA's Matt Mcelroy crossing the finishing line in first in Tongyong, first in Miyazaki, and now he's going to take the gold in Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic. A fine way to end the season. And he's still looking strong. He's got such a big gap now. He could take his foot off the pedal, but he's not doing so.
He could high-five the whole finish chute, I think. Still have a bit of a buffer.
Finally affords himself a look over his shoulder. He knows his work is done. He knows once again he's run a perfect race tactically, or he takes slightly the wrong route. Fortunately, that wasn't costly. In a sprint finish, that might have been quite interesting, but just coming up to 1 hour and 39 minutes, bang on. Matt Mcelroy crosses the line and takes gold for his 3rd successive race. What a finish to the season it's been for him. And he'll wait to see who's coming across the line in second. It's going to be Kevin Mcdowell with that white visor who gets across the line. Well, about the same gap, about 27 seconds. And then Morgan Pearson, who was the first American to drop off that 3 after they'd run pretty much the whole race. But the Star-Spangled Banner rules in the Caribbean as the Americans take the top 3.
What a nice way to finish the season, eh? And to have done the whole run together and then finishing it off, and it'd be a nice party in the American team tonight, I think.
Absolutely. Well, let's see who it is that's going to come across the line in 4th.
Studer, right?
Yeah, I think it was Studer was the last of the 3 Swiss athletes to be dropped off that lead group of 6 that had started so well, but he's had to run on his own for a lap and a half pretty much.
Yeah, once that heat gets you, it gets you hard. And here we've got a battle of the Swiss. So it would be Salvisberg and Brifford coming in together.
Yes, they've managed to hold off the attentions from those behind. That 6 had built up such a gap. It's been unable to be.
It's Salvisberg coming in first, Flory.
Also another good finish for Florian Salvisberg, a 5th place on the back of his podium finish last week.
And Adrian Brifford coming just behind him. So wow, three Americans and 3 Swiss.
Yeah, so a clean sweep for the Americans. We'll get some reaction from those 3 in just a moment. A bit of a sprint going on. There's Matt Sharp coming across the line from Canada. Okakura from Japan getting himself across the line inside the top 10.
It's a great race for him.
Well, it's the first of our Mexicans. So we thought the Mexicans might be involved. Prazilov from Russia.
It looks now like it's very hot out there. You can just see how they're suffering and they're coming through the line and have that, hot race kind of look all over them. I was Paris from Mexico, who was in this before. So first out of the Mexicans. It's one of the Germans. Igor Polyansky.
Yeah, just the legs starting to go Valar from the Czech Republic as well. You can just see.
Yeah, it's going to be a hot one for the women.
Yeah, it certainly will. The women's race coming up in about 30 minutes' time, so not much time to wait for the women's race.
Looks like we're backstage here.
Yes, the backstage tour in Santo Domingo. So this is what goes on behind the scenes at Triathlon. So steady stream coming across the line. Stefan Zackhaus from Luxembourg. His teammate Bob Haller had to pull out of the race before the start. We'll do the Canadians. You can see what it's taken out of them here, this 10-kilometer run.
Yeah, this is a brutal race.
There's Gomez from Mexico, who was in that lead group. He was at the back of that lead group on the bike for quite a while, Gomez. Coming in a long way behind our leaders, who are already, what, 4 minutes since our leaders crossed the line? Matt Wright from Barbados.
So waiting for the interviews for the top 3. Interesting to see what they have to say and how the run played out. If they felt they were running together or from the start they were kind of one by one racing for themselves. Grajales is coming across the line.
A couple of Canadians, Paquet and Forbes.
Hopefully they have some nice ice baths or something behind the finish line for them to cool down in. Colombian athletes.
Still they continue to cross the finishing line. Vasilev from Russia. Gonzalez from Mexico just going through the picture. There's Messias from Brazil.
Had such a brilliant race last weekend in Lima. Didn't make it to the front pack today, unfortunately. So running from the second pack. Furuya from Japan.
Andrade from Ecuador. So these guys are about 6 minutes down on our winner. Sato from Japan. Prazilov doesn't seem to want to leave the leave the finishing area at the moment. He's been there quite a while now. Still waiting for others to come across the line. So we will hopefully get some reaction. In fact, we can go and get some reaction now, I think. Let's hear from our race winner for the third race in a row for him. Let's get the thoughts of Matt Mcelroy.
The last three races, it comes down to having a good team, you know, a great coach, Ian O'Brien, sports psychologist, a great strength coach, Aaron Carson out of Rally Sport. It's having good support team at home, a great family behind you and friends. That's what makes a difference. I'm having fun.
And how are the last K of the run? Because we saw you guys running together for almost the whole run. What was going through your head?
¿Le gustaría aumentar las ventas? Pruebe Pitrix 24, el mejor CRM gratuito online utilizado por más de 5 millones de empresas.
Got an awesome running backgrounds, and Kevin's a great runner too. So I knew
Pitrix 24 le ayudará a administrar a sus clientes existentes, aumentar la cantidad de los prospectos potenciales, ejecutar campañas de marketing, emitir facturas y aceptar pagos online. Sorprende a sus clientes con un increíble soporte en tiempo real a través de email, teléfono, chat en vivo, messengers o redes sociales. Crezca más rápido, aprovechando las herramientas integradas de automatización de ventas y marketing disponibles dentro de Pitrix 24, que funcionan incluso cuando usted duerme. Y con la nueva aplicación móvil de Pitrix 24, puede trabajar desde cualquier lugar. Pitrix 24, free, unlimited, online.
It was pretty safe. There was a bad crash beginning of the bike, so I hope that guy's all right. Yeah.
Okay, well, congratulations and thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, Matt Mcelroy, hopefully you managed to get the gist of what he was saying. Apologies about the... I think that Spanish man was trying to sell us something over the top of that. I kept hearing telefono, which is, I don't think he was translating anyway. So Matt Mcelroy is our winner, 3 races in a row for him with the gold medal. An American clean sweep at the top of the leaderboard. So don't forget the women's race coming up in about 20 minutes' time with a 5K run due to the heat. So half the distance on the run. They'll just do 2 laps rather than 3. That will be the swim start where they'll be lining up very soon.
Yeah, you can see the women are warming up right now, being on the course and testing at the surf and getting a feel for the beach and how the water is moving.
Yeah, promises to be fascinating. So the temperature has warmed up a little bit as well. The water temperature was 26 earlier on, in the air 23. So we'll see how that's increased for the women's race in just a moment. And we've still got 2 more of our athletes that made the podium to hear from. Let's go down. I think we can hear from Kevin Mcdowell.
Okay, So, Kevin, congratulations. What a race this was for the USA athletes.
It was incredible coming in. I think we really wanted to make it 1, 2, 3. We didn't. I mean, yeah, it'd been nice to be the first one, but the order didn't matter as much as like making sure we got on the podium. So, especially on the run, that was definitely our focus, running together and not really attacking each other until the last lap. And I mean, Morgan made a move, and then Matt went, and Matt just had it on us, and I just had to like conserve. And today was all about conserving until the end. And I have to really thank my coach, John Hall, and also Aaron Densham and Bobby McGee and stuff, because like coming into this, like I've been so close to so many finishes and missing podiums, fourths and fifths. And last week I messed up, so this week I really tried to change the mind game of coming into here and actually watched a lot of Densham races and for inspiration. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that.
When you guys were running all together, the three of you together, what was it going through your mind? Were you talking to each other or planning?
No, it was pretty silent. I mean, you just had to conserve. It was a game of conserving today because, like, yeah, it wasn't as, like, it was still warm and there's a lot of humidity. So it was about just being patient. And that was my way today, just focusing on myself and being as patient and conserving as much energy until I needed to. And I just tapped out just right in time, just at the finish. So I'm pretty pleased with second. And it's a great way to finish the year, especially beginning of the year was pretty tough for me in the middle. So I'm pretty excited going forward. And I think we got some good momentum. And hopefully this helps us for 3 spots into the 2020 games.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you.
So as you heard, happy to be in that front three. Didn't matter about the order. I'm sure it did, really. I'm sure he'd have loved to have got a gold medal. I think he's just praising his teammates, obviously, but everybody, of course, full of appreciation for their coaches, their fitness coaches, the big team that goes around these athletes to make sure that they can be successful.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear about Aaron Densham too, who was third in the London Games, and how her now impacting other athletes and, you know, being able to coach and support them and give back into the next generation. So she's doing a great job with the US team.
Okay, so to complete our interviews, we've got one more to hear from. We've heard from Matt Mcelroy, we've heard from Kevin Mcdowell. Let's get the thoughts of the man who finished in third, the man who the man who was the first to be dropped, actually, off those first of the 3 Americans to finish on the podium. Morgan Pearson taking the bronze.
Morgan, congratulations. What a race it was for you.
Thank you so much.
How was the race overall? So from the swim, rough swim till the end?
It was a good race for me. Like, I actually had a really nice swim. I was in third the whole way, and I just was doing like distance per stroke and just relaxing. So that was nice. I've been working really hard on my swim this year, so I'm happy to see that showing in the races. And then the bike was, I was trying to conserve. I knew it'd probably be a big pack, and there's some not so strong runners that might be more incentivized to like push the bike. So I just was like trying to relax, trying not to go too far back in the pack, and just conserve. Like even the last lap, I thought I did a good job of moving up, get closer to the front without exerting myself too hard. So yeah, I was happy with that too. And then the run was, yeah, we got the U.S. guys and the Swiss guys at the beginning, and I actually felt really nice the first lap. But yeah, I don't think I have the strength over the 10K. So I had to take a few weeks off after Luzon. I was sick, so I thought I was in good shape, but I think it was more like a shorter distance. So yeah, I mean, Kevin and Matt are also really good runners, and Matt's obviously in incredible form, and he's really good at these World Cups and the heat. So yeah, I mean, I have no shame in losing those guys, but you always want more of yourself when you don't win. But yeah, I'm happy.
Yeah, and it's a third place, a podium sweep for USA, so what a good race for you guys.
Yeah, podium sweep's awesome. I mean, I know the U.S. guys. I don't know how it was in the past, but right now I think we're all kind of cheering for each other and trying to bring each other up. We want 3 guys at the Olympics next year, and we just, you know, the U.S. women have been so good in the past decade or so. Like we're like, I think we're kind of tired of being the you know, getting laughed at a little. So we're just pushing each other and kind of building each other up instead of you know, trying to beat each other. I mean, obviously the last lap we were all trying to beat each other, but I think like the first 2 laps I felt a good synergy with us, and yeah, I mean, I was happy to get. Like I said, third. You don't want to lose to 2 guys, but if I'm losing to 2 guys, I'm happy they're U.S.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
So it is a sweep for the USA at the top of the podium. Matt Mcelroy in first, Kevin McDowell in second, Morgan Pearson in third. We'll go and prepare for the women's race, which is coming up, starting in about 18 minutes' time from now. Join myself, Mark Tompkins, and Lisa Norden for that. Bye for the moment.